Good day, everyone. Welcome to Blacklogic, as well as Happy Labor Day. President of China and Putin slams U.S. building and blamed the West for war at Shanghai summit. Gassing Maxwell hints Epstein had ties to Trump officials. DOJ avoids probing. A top Chinese student with a visa is deported at the U.S. border with no clear reason. U.S. suspends nearly all Palestinian visas, stranding students and medical patients in Palestine. Historians reveal early Americas might have been Black Indians of African descent. And I know a lot of these tethers, as well as the white supremacists and even some Native Americans, they're not going to like this. All right, ladies and gentlemen. Now, first off, we're going to cover this story coming out of the summit that China as well as Russia was attending. I think it's very imperative that we cover this because they're really going hard against the West. They're going really hard against the West, ladies and gentlemen, especially America. And they don't just flat out say these things, because at the 2025 Shanghai Cooperation Organization, also known as the SCO, this SCO summit in China, or Tianjin, Xi Jinping slammed what he called bullying behavior and called out Cold War mentalities, while Vladimir Putin pinned the blame for the Ukraine war on the West, pointing fingers at NATO and imperialist strategies. So slowly but surely, even though supposedly, they're having negotiation talks with President Trump, trying to have a peace treaty and a ceasefire with Ukraine. But as the reports state, they're dividing more so from the West and leaning more to the East than all these other countries. Russia and Xi Jinping out of China, they are making ways through the ways of the BRICS. Do not forget the BRICS. They're forming their own coalitions outside of the G20, all the G summit, all the G20 summits of the 20 Western nations. Again, colliding and collaborating with power and economics. They are separating that and they're forming a coalition similar to what the G20 summit is all about. They formed the BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. There's a lot more countries that are joining up. They're all dividing from the West. They're dividing from countries like America, United States of America, that is, as well as the UK, France, Spain, Norway, Switzerland, you name it. They're separating and dividing power and leaning towards more people within their region and hold the same ideology that they hold. And as this continues to revolve, okay, and to mature, I'll keep you guys updated right here on Blacklogic. If you're new to Blacklogic, hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so you're notified every time I release a video and or go live. Now, of course, back on the scene, Gassing Maxwell, she hinted that some of Epstein's associates were characters within Trump's administration. So the Department of Justice refrained from pressing her for specifics, like, who are you referring to in the Trump administration? Because again, she said there are characters within the Trump administration still. So again, we either be the first administration or second administration of him being the 47th president, there's still some characters who were associates of Epstein along with Trump. But again, the Department of Justice did not ask for names, leaving the nature of these ties shrouded in mystery. Why? See, you know, there's a lot of things that's been going on, ladies and gentlemen. The continuous war between Ukraine and Russia, the continuous genocide of Palestine, and all other sorts of things with National Guard in U.S. blue cities because of crime, supposedly, even though Gavin Newsom, I'm no fan of Gavin Newsom, but I must point out, I believe either on his YouTube channel or he did some sort of press release where he was showing Republican-ran states and cities that had high crime. So again, as I was stating this, 2 weeks ago, why isn't President Trump deploying National Guard troops in Republican-ran states and cities with high crime. If we're so entwined with bipartisanship, then it doesn't matter what political party you affiliate yourself with. You should want National Guard troops, because if you want law and order and you want to decrease crime, even though crime may not be in your neighborhood or your community, you should still want the same for the entire United States of America. But somehow, if people lean right, they only see left. Left is all the problems. Left is just so woke, new generation. And if you're left, you only see right. Oh, they're imperialists, the fascists, and the authoritarianism, and all these other things that people state. See, again, ladies and gentlemen, here on Blacklogic, I just see the truth. And I know it's hard to see that through the veil and guise of manipulation that these two political parties have been playing the American people for quite some time. I'm not stating don't vote right. I'm not stating don't vote left. I'm just saying vote on what you believe will support, assist yourself, your family, and your community. But I think a lot more times people vote on hate, or they vote on dislike of one group, one people, one religion, one demographic, how they defame other people, how they characterize and assassinate people's character. So they so-called vote for the lesser of two evils. Let's not vote for evil, ladies and gentlemen. Let's just vote on truth. I know that's difficult because they've been manipulating the American people for quite some time. Now, Maxwell interview under limited immunity. And she also asserted that Trump was never inappropriate and downplayed conspiracy theories, likening them to Salem witch trial. And she also questioned the official ruling of Epstein's death as suicide. Now, meanwhile, her legal team is pursuing new evidence alleging government misconduct could justify her release. This is her ploy to get out of jail. This is her get out of jail free card. She's trying to publicly and socially exonerate Trump from any connections of any wrongdoing, stating that Trump was never inappropriate. And ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if he was inappropriate or not, but it seems as though she's saying things publicly, because she did not give names and I did not ask her for names, but she automatically exonerated Trump. I know a lot of people on the right going to love that. Me, I'm indifferent about it because I just don't know. I wish we had audio tapes, video clips, pictures of some of these so-called obscene acts, so there would be no question who was involved and who did what. It seems as though that the trail of who was involved in a lot of these heinous acts is running dry, because they're doing a lot of deflecting in government right now. They're throwing everything at us, ladies and gentlemen. They're throwing everything at us, ladies and gentlemen, because there's people on the right, there's people on the left, there's people in all between who want to know the truth about the Epstein files and some of these alleged victims. I thought this was a party of transparency. It's almost like they're transparent on some things and like they're covering up other things when we really look at this. A Chinese philosophy student identified only as Gu was similarly denied entry into the United States despite possessing a valid visa and full scholarship to the University of Houston. And this ordeal involving hours of interrogation and eventually deportation underscores intensifying scrutiny of Chinese students, even when all the proper paperwork is filed. Now, I don't have any feelings about this, but I would just give this young man some advice. President Trump already stated in one of his press hearings that he's going to allow 600,000 Chinese students to American colleges and universities. Just get on a bus, just get on a train with these other fellow Chinese students, and you'll be right back here. I don't have anything to say about this because, again, on one hand, the president is saying this, okay, Palestinians can't come in for medical aid and being refugees, but we have a lot of illegal immigration. I know that wasn't by the way of President Trump. I'm not trying to conflate the two. I'm not trying to intertwine the two. But it just amazes me how, okay, these group of people who seems as though are being genocide by one group of people that we are supporting, We won't allow them to come to America to be refugees and asylum seekers so we can give them medical aid and so they can get out of a war-torn nation that's been literally being taken over, in my opinion. Okay, that's literally being taken over. And there's been a lot of people talking about this. And if you're speaking from your perspective and the way you look at things, can that be deemed anti-Semitic? Because you believe that when you look at the UN partition plan of 1947 into 1948, where there was not a state of Israel and the state of Palestine in that land region, and that the UN and other European colonial powers divided Palestine to give white Europeans who followed the Jewish faith land so they would not be persecuted for their belief system into another people's region, allegedly, because I'm not anti-Semitic. And I've noticed that they've been diving away, and I mean literally diving away from calling people anti-Semitic. They call them racist. I don't know how Black people around the world can be racist, because we're some of the most oppressed people in the world. And we're still trying to build back. It doesn't matter if you're in America, you're in Great Britain, you're in Africa, you're in the Caribbean. Look at where all dark melanated people reside and look at them trying to bounce back from slavery and colonialism, from the apartheid to slavery, chattel slavery here in America, to all the 5 million slaves that they took to Brazil. I want you guys to really look at how people would like to use white supremacist ideology and saying, oh, they're just lazy, they have low IQ, they're not smart. You keep continuing to hear the president call melanated people low IQ. That's white supremacist ideology. And he's all over the board with that. Then there was a tennis match, and I forgot the young lady's name, but she was a Black American playing against a white woman from another country. And she said that she wasn't educated. How do you know if she was educated or not? And she spoke very well, in my opinion. She spoke very intelligently. But why do they believe that hurts us? Because it doesn't hurt me. Oh, I don't think you're that smart. I think you need to do your research. You have such a low IQ. Never took the IQ test. Now what? Well, and a lot of these people who say this, they have never taken the IQ test either. Now, I will dive back a little. I did take the IQ test. I believe my IQ was around like 135. And granted, there's so many IQ tests. I know there's a standard IQ test, but the one that I took, I was like 135, 140, meaning highly intelligent and genius. And my IQ test was basically putting shapes together when I was 3. No, I'm kidding. Just kidding. But they're using these racial slurs and under the guise of not being intelligent, as if all of these people who are stating these claims are intelligent or more intelligent. I wonder, how do we measure intelligent when you do not fall in line with a white supremacist system? Meaning that the IQ test was curated and constructed by who? White people. And then they want everybody to take the test that they constructed. How about this? How about each and every group of people? Now, granted, people will say that race is a social construct. I got it. But when you talk about the 3 racial categories and how they're backed up by your not your genealogy, excuse me, but by your phenotype, right? You have Caucasoid, Negroid, and Mongoloid. Okay. And again, that's the color of your skin. That's the shape of your head, your lips, your eye color. You have all these tall tales of the 3 major racial categories of what group you fall in. Okay. So now if those 3 groups, and they came up with a 4th term, I think they call them Australoid. Okay. But nonetheless, if they come up with a test for these 4 or 3 so-called racial categories, and then we score low, then yeah, low IQ. But you just can't say these terms when you don't even know if people took the test. But I got it. You are presuming that if they did take the test, they will have a low IQ. again, I think people who use that term against whoever they use that term against, we should take the test at the same time, right beside each other, just on the spot. President Trump are calling a lot of people. He called Charlemagne the God. I'm no fan of Charlemagne the God. I'm not taking up for the brother, but I will say this. He seems to be very intelligent to me. Oh, that's because you're low IQ. Oh, okay. We got it. We got it. But anyway, President Trump, if you're calling all these people low IQ, then take the test with them. Again, no one is calling out him slurring and diminishing people's character by saying these things. I'm not saying that he didn't say it to any white people, but lately it seems as though he's on his black attack, so to speak. Okay, because he also eradicating history from the Smithsonian, so people don't learn about the treachery and chaotic past of America and how they obtained this land. I digress, because I can go on. Believe me when I tell you about this. Now, the U.S. government has halted nearly all visa approvals for Palestinian passport holders, severely impacting students, medical travelers, and diplomats who now face uncertain futures amid a sweeping suspension justified under national security concerns. So we can bring people over here from Afghanistan. We can bring people over here from all over the world. But because Israel is at war with Hamas, we cannot allow innocent Palestinian men, women, and children who have been, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to even go into this. We know that these people have been tormented. And there's many claims that people are stating that the Israelis that are derived in this Palestinian region they call Israel are not only Zionists, but they're evil, and they're trying to, again, expand their territory. They're trying to expand throughout Palestine and take over East Jerusalem, the West Bank, as well as Gaza. They're trying to expand the empire even into Syria. And all these Muslim powers, and I've stated this before, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, the moral authority for the Middle East, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, the North African countries who are Muslims. And here's the thing, when you look into the Holy Quran, you will see that, and I'm paraphrasing, that they should be standing up and protecting other fellow Muslims. And you don't hear a peep. They're silent, and it's almost as though they are complicit in this takeover of Palestine. You even had European powers. You had Prime Minister Starmer, as well as Prime Minister Macron of France, and that was the UK. During this so-called next UN summit, I believe supposed to happen here next week or two, they're going to recognize Palestine as a state. And I've called upon that they should do an emergency meeting to recognize them as a statehood and start to provide protections. But again, we haven't seen anyone move to call an emergency UN meeting so these actions could occur. Let the genocide continue. That's what it says to me. They've been very complicit. Now, historians are exploring evidence suggesting early Americans included Black Indians, Native peoples with African ancestry, a narrative often erased or sidelined in traditional historical accounts. So you're going to have your $5 Indians, you're going to have your Mongoloid, red-colored Native Americans stating that this is untrue, even though we have tangible evidence, we have tangible proof that Blacks were here in the Americas prior to Christopher Columbus, as well as the Mongoloid-looking type people. Not just pictures, okay? Even though these pictures are actual, these are not AI created, okay? Because I know a lot of people like to say that. But before, I just want to go down the line here. Black natives were here in the Americas first. And for my tethers out there, Africans were here first. Because again, Black Americans, foundational Black Americans, we will never say that thousands of years past that our ancestors, if you follow the generations, did not come from Africa. Here's the claim we're making when it comes to how a lot of so-called Black people came to America. History states that only anywhere between 400 and 500,000 Black people or enslaved Africans were brought to the Americas, not Central America, not South America, but to North America, to United States of America that we call here today. Roughly 400 to 500,000. Now, majority of enslaved Africans were taken to Brazil. They have the largest Black population outside of Africa. Okay, roughly 5 million enslaved Africans were brought to Brazil. Now, when they brought those 400 to 500,000 enslaved Africans to the Americas, they stated that dark-colored Black people were already here prior to, that we were already free in this land. And granted, do not forget, Africans were some of the first explorers. So, of course, my great grandmother and grandfather are Africans from the continent of Africa. But because the Moors and other Black groups explore the world, my ancestry is here in America. Just as though you have someone from Ghana is Ghanaian. They don't say, well, I'm from Africa, but I'm Ghanaian. I'm from Jamaica, and I know that my roots stem back from Africa. The same with Foundational Black America. We are Black Americans. We are Native Black Americans. And we understand that 1,000 years past, that yes, our great, so on and so forth, ancestors came from Africa. We won't denounce that. We won't deny that. But just as well, Nigerians, Kenyans, Ugandans, they are a different group of people, a different ethnic group based upon culture and experience. The same with Foundational Black Americans. So when I look at this and we really break this down, we're cutting through the lies we've been told in history, in books, and in classroom, because they said that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. They said that the first people of this land were Asiatic Mongoloid tribes. But family, the truth they buried under centuries of propaganda is that Africans, our great ancestors, were here first, before Columbus, before the Pilgrims, before the English or the Spanish. Again, our great African ancestors touched these shores, not as slaves, not as cargo, but as navigators and merchants and the original people and scientists and researchers, so on and so forth. Our people have been here for thousands of years. And when they brought over those 400 to 500,000 enslaved Africans in so-called the early 1500s, there was an ethno-genocide where we have mixed and mastered and intertwined to become Foundational Black Americans. So we would never denounce our African ancestry. When I look at my DNA of ancestry.com, yeah, I'm a bit of this and a bit of that, all from Africa. But I also have I think 5% Native American. So when we, and again, Native Americans, the Mongoloid looking type people that are here, that are on reservations, that those white supremacists and the colonial powers that were here prior almost killed off entire tribes, and some tribes don't even exist anymore because of the genocide. We still cannot forget our roots, that we've been here for a very long time. That's why you see certain images, you see all these pyramids around America, and you see artifacts that look like Black people. Wide nose, high cheekbones, full lips. Does that look like a Hispanic person to you? Does that look like a Spanish person? Does that look like I can keep going on and on and on. Now, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, because he laid this out and they came before Columbus. Now, I do want to point this out to a lot of you, because you guys may not be familiar. Give me 1 second here, ladies and gentlemen. I want to pop up this book for you. Now, they came before Columbus, the African presence in ancient America. And again, the author of this book is Ivan van Sertima. And I'm just going to read this very quickly here. Let me see if I can blow this up so you guys can read along as well. The secret route from Guyana, it says, and he, Columbus, wanted to find out what the Indians of Hispaniola had told him, that there had come to it from the south and southeast Negro people, who brought those spear points made of a metal, which they call Guyane, of which he had sent to the king and queen for a saying, which was found to have 32 parts, 18 of gold, 6 of silver, and 8 of copper. African Guyanes were alloys of gold containing copper for the sake of its odor, for it seems that the Negroes like to smell their wealth. The Guyanes brought home by Columbus were assayed in Spain and were found and contained the same ratio of aloe as those in African Guyana. Now, and of course, if you guys want to read this book for yourself, any scholars out there, anyone who actually wants to know the truth, believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, I will give you this book for free. Just leave your email in the comments below. Leave your email in the comments below, and I will try to go through that as fast as I can to send this book out. Okay. Also, again, here's my library, ladies and gentlemen. Here's my library, and I will go. And I have thousands of books. Now, I'm just going to show you. If you see any book that you would like to read, okay, any book that you would like to read, you might have to pause this. These are all in PDF format. You will be amazed the amount of reading I used to do. I won't say like Cat Williams, I read 3,000 books in 1 year. No, this is over almost 30 years of reading. Okay. I used to read a lot. Now you can ask my wife. I read a lot, watch a lot of TV. I'm not going to lie to you. I still read a little. But again, you might see some books twice. See 48 Laws of Power. Okay. I have a lot of books in here. Again, I can just scroll through this. Sexuality and Slavery. I have that other book, but there's another book I do want to touch on. There is another book that I do want to touch on before I go too far. But just piggybacking or going back to what I was stating before about this book, They Came Before Columbus. In this book, he actually proved that African mariners crossed the Atlantic using currents that flow naturally from West Africa straight into the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico. And archaeological evidence from African-like stoneheads in Mexico to cotton and tobacco found in Africa long before Columbus set sail that actually backs this up. Now, I want to touch on some video clips that this young man broke down, some other history that I believe that you guys should be aware of. Okay. So we're going to comb through this. I want you guys to listen in on this.
So a lot of people like to talk about the Plecker paperwork from Virginia in 1924, which is understandable. That's a good paperwork. But people don't talk about the laws that were passed in Virginia way before Plecker. And for people who's going to be like, oh, you're only talking about Virginia. Well, we're going to see if these laws only happened for Virginia. Now, this right here is the status at large, being a collection of all the laws of Virginia. From the first session of the legislature in the year 1619. From the year 1619, the same year they said they brought Africans here. Pay attention. This is volume 3 by William Waller Henning. All right. So these are laws that they passed at the same year that they said they brought African slaves to America. All right. And for clearing all manner of doubts which hereafter may happen to arise upon the construction of this act or any other act, who shall be accounted a mulatto, right? You can see on the left right there, who should be deemed mulattoes, repealing in clause, right? Be it enacted and declared, and it is hereby enacted and declared that the child of an Indian and the child, grandchild, or great-grandchild of a Negro shall be deemed, accounted, held, and taken to be a mulatto. So what does that mean? They did.
Now, of course, documentation like this, people, again, I know when you get into the information about a lot of these books, I wanted to point out, okay, I wanted to point out and reference some of what this young man was talking about, because again, I don't want to lose context on this. Okay, now this right here is one of the books he was talking about. I just want to point out certain words, and this one phrase that I found, I thought was very, very interesting. It says that if an English woman being freed shall have a bastard child by any Negro or mulatto, meaning that they were already having sex. Okay, they were already having sex, because this English woman, meaning white woman, was having a child by any Negro or mulatto, meaning mixed breed. She paid the sum of 15 pounds sterling within 1 month after such bastard child should be born, to the church wardens of the parish where she shall be delivered of such child, in default of such payment shall be taken into the possession of the said church wardens and disposed of for 5 years, and the said fine of 15 pounds or whatever the woman shall be disposed of for should be paid 1/3 part to their majesty for and towards the support of the government and the contingent charges thereof, and 1/3 part of the use of the parish where the offense is committed. Now, and again, this is coming out the laws of Virginia, and I want to make sure you guys have the right reference, volume 3. I also have volume 1 through 3 and all these, but this is the volume that the young man is referencing, that we're talking about currently here. Okay, that is what this young man is actually referencing. Okay, to provide more context, that this is again before. Now it is a timeline. It's from 1619, I believe, until like the early 1800s or the late 1700s. But the certain sections he's talking about, how could you already have mulattoes? And I'll let him break it down.
Two separate groups. It said Indian and Negro. So they separated groups and said they're changing them to mulatto, which is a black person. And it further enacted that all and every other act and acts and every clause and article herefore made for so much thereof as relates to declaring who shall not bear office in this country, and are hereby repealed and made void to all intents and purposes as if the same had never been made. This is reclassification. This is what you call paper genocide. And then I got to thinking to myself, I'm like, wait a minute. During colonial times, weren't most states considered Virginia during that time? And guess what? I was right. A lot of states were. Several states or parts of them were originally part of Virginia. These include Kentucky, West Virginia, and portions of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Additionally, during the colonial period, Virginia's claims extended over areas that later became parts of Western Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and South Carolina. So all these states were Virginia first and under the jurisdiction of Virginia, which means what? All these states and parts of these states were reclassifying Indians as mulattoes, which are black people.
Again, as we really dive into this, and I'm not going to go on some sort of riff and thing like a Dane Calloway. This is just an introduction to this, ladies and gentlemen, so we can really drill down to the truth of all matters. Because when we look at these volumes of the laws of Virginia, when we look at this, and again, the ones I reference are the laws of Virginia, volumes 1 through 3. They show how early colonial elites legally separated Africans from native peoples and poor whites. Why? Because there was a mixing. Africans and Seminoles and Florida resisted together. And granted, if you guys are not familiar with some of the stories, about the Black Seminoles, if you guys are not familiar with the Black Seminoles and some of the things that, again, that Blacks were here for a very long time prior to 1492, again, the evidence states for itself. And here's a book that you guys can actually reference, A People's History of Florida, 1513 to 1876, how Africans, Seminoles, women, and lower class whites shaped the sunshine state. How they, shaped the sunshine state. But this is how I think, by eradicating certain doctrine and books from history, how you basically erase a lot of contributions and claim to the land that was already, basically occupied by Black people, by Africans of, 1,000 years past. People history of Florida highlights how Africans, another group of people, long before officially founded America. And you look at the Olmec heads in Mesoamerica, the Olmec heads that people always talk about. We're talking about broad features, unmistakably African. Look at the linguistic ties between the Mandinka words and the native dialects. Even the language is very similar. You look at the agriculture and evidence that Africans brought knowledge of crops like yams and techniques that reshape the soil. You look at the African presence in early Americas by J.V. Harvester. That's at the Smithsonian. They may take that away. African and Native American, the language of race and the evolution of red Black peoples by Jack D. Forbes. Black Indians, a hidden heritage by William Loran Katz. All this information is out there. People say that they're scholars, but again, they would like to adhere to emotional trauma that Black people would not hear, that it was Mongolian, red type, Native Americans, and people who, again, paid $5 to be part of the Indian stroll so they can be $5 Indians. And a lot of them were Caucasoid sort of people. And I must point this out because I think a lot of times when I do these breakdowns, people act as if this is about hate. This is not about hate, ladies and gentlemen. It's about the truth. It's about, this isn't about rewriting history to erase others. This is about the truth. Foundational Black Americans, descendants of those first Africans here, are not outsiders to this land. So when people tell foundational Black Americans, go back to your country, I should go back to DC. Some people may go back to Georgia. Some people may go back to California. Some people may go back to the Carolinas. Where you want us to go? This is, again. Because if we're all going back to our country, that means America will be uninhabitable. It will nobody be here. The Europeans, the Caucasoid Europeans will go back to Europe. The Mongolian type will go back to Asia. The Negroid, they will go back to Africa. Okay. Before exploration and exploring. So again, I mean, when we look at this family, we shaped it. We shaped this land. We bled for it. And now ancestors set foot on it long before America was even an idea. Now, foundational Black Americans, we have promoted a year of 1526 because we have actual proof of when some of the first slaves were here and reports there were Black people already here when those 100 slaves that Vasquez bought, who was a Spanish conquistador, when he bought 100 slaves here and they rebelled against him, they did an uprising, rebelled, and then they ran off into the woods, and they stated that they ran off into the woods with people who look like them. They didn't say they were red or different color or they were shaped different. They said they looked like them. So the question becomes, why are we still treated like foreigners on our soil we help create, that we help defend, that we help enrich and made rich? Again, there's no historian, there's no accountant, there is no economist that will tell you otherwise. The reason why America is the richest country in the world, because it has had hundreds of years of free labor, that they didn't have to pay people for the work that was being done. So it catapulted American economics on a whole new level. Only recently in the past 10 years have China been catching up to us. So again, who benefits from tethering us to a false story that says we only arrived in chains? Tethers, because they love to lean to white supremacist ideologies. as well as white supremacists say that we don't have a claim to the land, and other groups of people who just like to chime in. But nonetheless, my answer is real clear. They want us to be blind without power. They want us blind to our power. They want us stupid to their low IQ remarks. They want to call us unintelligent. And again, this is not to those non-tethers. This is not to people who don't align themselves with white supremacist ideology. And when I reference white supremacy and the ideology therein, I'm not talking about all white people. I'm not talking about all black people. I'm not talking about all Asian people or Hispanic people or any other group. I'm talking about people who lean towards white supremacy and white supremacy ideology. And that can come from any group, because you have some black people out here who really lean tough in a white supremacy space, let me tell you. But I'm here to rip I'm really here to rip the Band-Aid off the sore. I'm really to put a gunshot in the wound. Our great, great, great ancestors were here before 1492. Black natives were already here. So when I tell you guys this, Black Americans, we are not a footnote. And for the 1,000 millionth time, foundational Black Americans are the foundation of this land.